Steven, thanks for the time. I imagine you have been flitting in and out of offices, talking with important people and all that. So thanks for the time to come in and talk about, I think, one big global theme that's been dominating everyone's lips, and I think we can reduce it to one word: Trump, and the kind of things that he's brought onto the global debate and the global economics. Protectionism that he has brought. I mean, some people suggest when you look at the U.S., for instance, the U.S. economy seems to be in a very healthy spot.
Yes.
And unemployment is at record lows, and the economy is growing. But there are implications globally going forward. What are they?
Well, we had this whole America First strategy, and it is designed by the Trump administration to try and boost the economy as much as possible. But there's costs to doing that in some senses. One is that the trade deficit, the US has a big trade deficit, they may get worse as a result of that. So what the administration wants to do is it wants to make sure, as well as growing, that it reduces its trade deficit, and that's where the protectionism comes in, because, as Trump says, everyone else has been gaining at America's expense, as it were, and the result of that is this big trade deficit. So obviously if the US could reduce that trade deficit, in a sense that might be worse for the rest of the world. So right. That's where the danger lies, and particularly perhaps if the US tries to do it through this protectionist route and trying to block or to make imports coming into the US much more expensive, which is what these tariffs are designed to do.
Yeah, many people have suggested that Trump says a lot of things loudly and then backs down and increases perhaps incrementally what he would have suggested would be like Big Bang approach.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you can probably imagine this is maybe something that he bought from his sort of business background. But when you look at things like talking about tariffs on Chinese goods, $150 billion of Chinese imports, for instance, which he threatened a little while ago, and now it's been said that obviously they're not going to do that, at least not for the moment, because it seems as if the US has been able to draw some concessions out of China. China is saying, well, we're going to reduce our tariffs, for instance, on imports, which the US has been pressing for. So yes, you're right. A lot of this is blackmail, bully boy tactics, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But the US is obviously taking this stance, as he himself has said, that when the US has got a trade deficit with everyone, then the US can't lose a trade war. Unfortunately, I'm not sure I necessarily agree with that. I think most economists would say that everyone actually loses in a trade war, including the US.
Absolutely. Everybody loses. The US role itself in the world is changing with the way Trump has come into his presidency. I mean, I remember at the end of the Second World War, everybody writing agreed that this was a unipolar world with the US in a dominant position. Now you're getting into a situation where you cannot trust the word of the US, and people are saying it is no longer the leader that we all expected. I think I heard the French president the other day pronounce on such. What are the implications for the dollar? And I guess, I don't know if you're able to talk a little bit for some of our smaller boys like our emerging market currencies and therefore the rand.
Yeah, I mean, the consequences are in many respects are sort of quite complicated, quite difficult. And I think the market is, you know, having a tough job getting its head around the Trump administration. You know, policy by tweet, as it were, is something that's certainly new for everyone, and that causes, for a start, creates a lot of volatility in the markets, and that's obviously generally a bad thing very often as far as emerging market currencies are concerned, as we're seeing at the moment, and that's one reason why the rand is under pressure. If the US does continue to go through this process of looking more inwardly, and it pulls out of multilateral organizations, as it has been doing, it stops the progress of globalization, then those things may play out quite well in a domestic political context for Trump himself. Is it to the benefit of the global economy? Then I would say that it's probably not. And in that sense, then emerging market, you know, the dollar itself could stay relatively firm, at least for a little while, I think, against emerging market currencies. But my concern on a longer term basis is that possibly one of the reasons why the dollar generally is a fairly strong currency, particularly against emerging market currencies. One of the reasons for that is the sort of confidence that people have in the US political system, in the institutions, the Federal Reserve, and beyond that in the Congress and those sorts of things, the judiciary as well even.
Yeah.
And those things, if they're slightly undermined by the Trump administration, which I think is a danger, and I think the longer term consequences of that are actually quite negative. So my view in summary is, for the moment the dollar's going to get stronger, the longer term look for it to weaken.
I'd have loved to talk about sterling and talk about what you guys are going through with Brexit, but we've got to talk about Cyril Ramaphosa approaching his first 100 days in office. An international view on how that's playing out internationally. How do you guys see this guy, a trade unionist, a billionaire, and now a politician?
Well, I think, most international investors would see the political situation as having stabilised and over the last sort of 6 months or so. The question obviously is going forward, to what extent is that put into kind of practical action, and I think that generally at the moment international investors are, if you like, giving South Africa and the Rand, if you like, the benefit of the doubt.
Right.
Yeah. So the Rand obviously has been under some degree of pressure just recently, but if we look at it compared to many emerging market currencies, particularly some that have been under significant pressure, and the weakness in the Turkish lira is a very political issue, to be quite honest. And so I think that there is a sense perhaps that the financial markets could attack, if you like, currencies where there is political concern, and perhaps the extent to which its South African Rand is maybe not being attacked significantly suggests that the market is still, international investors are still reasonably confident about the political change. And we'll see whether that continues, because obviously a difficulty sometimes is that even if the Rand maybe doesn't deserve to weaken too much, sometimes if we get into like an emerging market crisis type situation, then inevitably it will fall.